Fellow lepers. My first encounter with a leper was in 1958 in Kalaupapa, Hawaii. I was a teenager then, 15 years old and in my 10th grade. Two lepers, who were in the early stages of the disease, had visited our school as part of a sensitization program initiated by the Hawaii Ministry of Health to get us acquainted with the disease. When they arrived, and throughout their one-day visit, they kept their distance. They were clothed in overalls and donned masks. They waved at us and we waved back. They spoke to us and we watched with rapt attention, not because we were so interested in what they had to say, but because we were respectfully disgusted with the discolored patches of skin around their fingers and the obvious absence of eyebrows and lashes. The second person, his name was Nash, I still remember, had some swelling on his earlobes too. In those days, the leper colony was about 50 miles away from the community where I lived with my parents on the island of Hawaii. We have made a home in Honolulu, the state's capital. The colony was headed by a young priest, Father Gabriel. Fresh out of seminary after spending 12 years training as a priest, Father Gabriel decided to dedicate his whole life in his service to the lepers who found a home in the island. I never knew I would answer to God's call to serve there one day. Maybe it was the passionate appeal with which Father Gabriel spoke on that fateful day when he visited our camp. There was so much pathos in his voice, and his hazelnut-shaped eyes, which focused on me, have kept my desire to serve there alive. It has been 6 years since I first saw the lepers in my high school, and here, in the University of Hawaii, Hilo, I had someone talking to me again about lepers and leprosy. He described how helpless and hopeless the lepers usually were when they first arrived the colony. He also told us about how he, together with his team of volunteers, worked tirelessly to nurse them back to health. Sadly, I must confess, he said, not all lepers that come to us in the island make it beyond 3 weeks, but a large number of them are alive today. While some have been integrated into the society and are back to their lives and families, others have decided to help us with the work here. I couldn't get over the priest's voice ringing in my ears as he spoke about the enormity of the work over there, and about 2 weeks after my graduation, I broke the news to my parents. I have prayed about this, and I'm sure that this is what God is leading me to Kalaupapa. There are no words to describe the disappointment on my dad's face when I told him I was going to volunteer my services at the lepers colony. My mom was too stunned to utter any word. What her words couldn't do, her tears did. What has psychology got to do with healthcare? And to think that you aren't going to be in a decent hospital, my dad asked. In moments like this, when he was expressing his displeasure, his Hawaiian accent had a way of slipping in. It usually sounded very funny, but that day it was not a good time to laugh. The atmosphere was tense. Yeah, I was telling my dad that I would rather work as a volunteer in an isolated island packed with lepers than work with his friend who offered me a job as the public relations officer in his multi-million-dollar firm in California. I am offering my services as a social worker there, Dad. Yeah, I was trying to make my dad see reasons with me. I was convinced about this decision. I thought it silly too. Yet I have learned to listen to the voice of God in whatever decision I make. I must confess that this was a very difficult one. But don't you think you're exposing yourself to danger? I mean, what if you get infected too? That provided me with another reason to rethink my decision, but my mind was made up. Father Gabriel had spent out of the dangers of working there already. Son, if that's what God's asking you to do, go ahead. My mom finally spoke. Her voice sounded croaky after every effort to suppress the cry that was choking her throat. As if on a cue, she gently stood up from the chair where she sat and made for their bedroom upstairs. We had just finished dinner. I'm glad I waited until after the meal before breaking the news to them. I joined my dad as we cleared the table. No one said anything to the other. But that was 28 years ago. I have lived among the lepers since then. Before my parents passed on, my father died in 1979 and my mother followed in 1986. They visited me on the island several times, and they were glad I made the decision to work among lepers. I got to marry Valerie, one of the nurses who worked in the colony, and we have been blessed with 3 wonderful children, Damian, Teresa, and Albert. Our children were named after some of the greatest people who have worked among lepers in recent years. Father Damian was a Catholic priest who settled and worked among the lepers here in Kalaupapa, 1873 until his death in 1889. Mother Teresa was well known for her work in Calcutta, India. Otto Albert, on the other hand, was also a physician who served in Kalaupapa. When Father Gabriel had to retire home after 38 years of self-service on the island, I was recommended to take over from him as the director of the lepers' home. The years that would follow saw the expansion of the work and the establishment of a partnership with a team of researchers from California who had developed a number of antibiotics for successful treatment of the disease. On a Saturday morning, in the month of June 1992, I just finished leading the evening prayers at the chapel when I decided to get a cup of steaming coffee. I filled the cup and made to take a step when the cup slipped off my hand and the hot coffee poured all over my feet. But I felt no pain. Immediately, it dawned on me that I had leprosy. Like the people who have been taken care of, I also felt what it means to have leprosy. I have started treatment for the disease and I am getting better very fast. Like Jesus, our high priest, who is familiar with our weaknesses and understands them. And as the writer of Hebrews said, I have lived among these people and I have been touched by their infirmity. Last Sunday, during the church service, when I stood up to share the word of God with them, it was very easy to address them as my fellow lepers.